Hi, I'm Lisa Griffin with the Pigeon Letters design team, and today I want to show you how to create a stylized bird in Procreate using the Vintage Texture Procreate kit from Peggy. In it, there are 18 fabulous brushes, canvases, and papers that you can use to create your own beautiful drawings. We'll start by using one of the supplied papers in the kit, and this is the speckled paper that I just love and will demonstrate on. With the speckled paper loaded, you can easily see how to toggle the effects on and off, where to place artwork in the layers so that the effects will show versus the background color. You see all the wonderful brushes. There are 18 fabulous brushes in here, and the pigeon pencil is phenomenal. It's just a wonderful texture. It mimics a 6B pencil, and it has a wonderful sensitivity to it. There's also a great antique shader that I love, and it comes with a variety of palettes. So for this demonstration, I have toggled on the Vintage 1 and 2 palette, and that's what I will be using in this demonstration as we create this very stylized little bird. With that palette selected, I'm going to take that nice warm orangey red color like the terracotta, and I'm going to use that to outline this bird so you can just see how I started, like the idea I had for this tutorial. And I wanted it to be a very simplified shape. It's a very basic bird with nice rounded edges, just a little pudgy bird I thought would be fun to work with. And simple shapes, going for that triangle beak and the little dot eye, a very simplified wing. I am gonna separate a little belly area on the bird because I want to do something special with that. And for the tail feathers, it's like a little sideways heart. Down on the bottom, I'm going to have just 2 simple sticks, and that will represent his legs. And that circle is just to remind me I like grounding the illustration, so I'm going to put a base shadow there at the end. So that's just to give you an idea if you want to follow along. Or you can go ahead and draw your own simple bird design. Really, I want you to have fun with this. So once you have your rough design in, I like to set that layer to multiply and then knock down the opacity so that I have that as my bones, for lack of a better word, or foundation, as I begin adding color to this illustration. We're going to start by filling in the body, which really is the base color of this bird. So I do want to make sure that all these little areas are closed off because for this large shape, I'm planning to do a color drop. So I'm just going back through and making sure those lines are relatively clean. And I'm going to name this layer body. And this is our base shape for the bird. Color drop, you just grab their color selection and drop right into the layer. And if you hold on to it, you can actually see the color threshold happening. You can slide to the left and the right to help clean up that edge a bit. And if you go too far, it'll fill in your whole page. I like using this because it is helpful and it just makes it look a little neater. Then you can always zoom in. And if there's some tiny edges that were left out, just neaten them up a bit. You certainly don't want someone to look at your illustration and be able to see this like messy little outline, and anyone who uses Procreate would probably just know exactly what caused it. It's just not the cleanest color drop. Now I'm going to think about the little belly and the tail. And I'm going to pull that raspberry color. There's a nice contrast between those 2 warm colors. and just go in and outline again over the color. I'm not going to color drop because I do love the texture of this pigeon pencil brush. So I'm just going to go in and a little haphazardly color because I want some of that wonderful terracotta-ish color to shine through. When I work on the iPad, I tend to mimic how I would work traditionally. That's why I love saying I'm a tradigital illustrator, because if I'm not combining techniques, I'm mimicking what I would do in traditional mediums. And I love when the color of the page shines through, when things have a very hand-tooled look. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm so fond of this Procreate pack. I'm still trying to decide on that little wing. For now, I'm just putting in this beige color. I don't know if I love it. We might be changing it, but for now, we'll see how this goes. And I'm just going to drag and drop here. And I'm going to pull this yellow and draw the beak. And I'm also going to have the little legs on this layer too, because they're going to be the same color. And just roughly coloring that in, just like I would if I were working with my Prismacolor pencils. All right, let's grab another color from the palette and we're going to stick with the pigeon brush. Now we're going to start layering in texture. So above the belly and the tail, add a layer and make that a clipping mask. And I'm going in just with that pencil and making like some hash marks to the tail. And we're going to do the same thing to the belly. When you're done with those marks, if you're happy, great. And if not, you can always go in and adjust the layer. It's easy to do. You just click right on the layer and you can lower the opacity slider bar to your liking. Whenever I'm happy with a clipping mask and a layer together, I tend to just pinch them. I like to limit my layers and keep my workspace pretty neat. We're going to select the Antique Shader tool, and I'm demonstrating it here. Oh, it's fabulous. It's one of my favorites. Has such a wonderful, you'll see. Just try it out with me. You'll see. It's a great brush. Okay, we're going to make another layer above the body and make sure that it's set as a clipping mask. And we're going to deepen that orangey red color. I use the color picker there to do this because I want a deeper shade that's going to really ground our little bird and give a feeling of weight. And then I go in and select almost a mid-tone of that color, because when I add the texture, I like making it look somewhat of like a gradient, so that you see a transition in color. What I did just there was I lowered the opacity of the rough because I felt like those lines were coming through and it was muddying the effect of adding this texture. And then, oops, then what you want to do is make sure you're not on your sketch layer. Go back to the clipping mask layer, and this time I'm taking a lighter variation of that color. So you see you have light at the top that adds that little highlight and a darker color down at the base. And here I'm just darkening it a little bit more, and you can see it. I know sometimes it's hard to see on screen, It is subtle, but it does add such character. And you can just play around with the color. As you can see, I'm just selecting with my finger, going in, using the color wheel, and just deepening, and kind of, it's a little bit of a fluid approach. It's a little intuitive. You can lower the opacity now and just go in and blend. And this is a great way that you won't have like those, I don't know, like a line, like a demarcation line. Instead, if you're subtly blending, and I do it in those little round strokes, makes that whole effect more cohesive. I'm going to do the same thing on the beak. I'm adding a clipping layer right above the beak. Try a different brush just so you can see. This is the dry edger brush. The variety in these textures. Certainly not a pack you can easily get bored by. Again, similar to what I did at the base of the bird, I'm just going in and adding that deeper color to add just a nice variation. It makes the whole illustration more interesting, in my opinion. And I'm just going to add a little bit of detail with that brush, that edger brush, on the legs as well. And I like it, so I pinch them together. Gotta add his little eye. And I'm gonna go back and use the pigeon pencil for that. I don't know if that's a little too big. A little bit smaller. Yeah, that looks better. Not like in that wing. It's just, I wanted more contrast. So that's the great thing about a clipping mask, right? You can go in and you can play around a bit, and it's a non-destructive process to your illustration. Right now it's very warm, and I was really thinking a cooler color might, yeah, no, not that. One of the benefits of working digitally, it's forgiving. I'm going with the cooler color. I like this deep color, that deep green, but I want to make it a little bit lighter because I want to layer the texture up. And this brush does that beautifully. I'm trying to zoom in a little bit so you guys can see better. Yeah, I like that. It just needed more contrast, and the beige that I had in there before just was doing, yeah, just wasn't doing it for me. So we're gonna pinch those together because I'm liking that green. And now I'm going to add a clipping mask to this, and just same brush. See how it overlaps so well on itself, and you just get that lovely, it's a dense brush, so I feel like you really could do a lot with this one. And I think it's important, especially in a stylized illustration, that you add variety to your color, but also the textures that you're applying there. So we have the lines, we have that wonderful, more oxidized looking brush, and now we're using this one that has a more compact, dense feel to it. And that variety is visually interesting. The dry edger brush is one of the drying brushes in this pack, and it just, I don't know, it's a gritty brush, but it's a fine brush, so it's great for just going in and cleaning up some edges. And I'm sampling that pretty like goldenrod color up on the beak because I want to tie that into the bird. And I'm just going to go in here. Again, it's on a new clipping mask layer, which allows me that freedom of drawing lines that are appearing only on his wing. You don't have to do lines. You could always play with a different motif if you want to do dots or hearts or vines. And I'm switching back to my very favorite pigeon pencil, and I'm using this just to add a little more contrast and definition around that wing. Has a lovely collage feel to it right there. A little bit of a 3D, and I like that. I want to play that up a bit more, so I'm going back to the body. Benefit of working in layers that so I sampled some of the deeper terracotta color, switching my brush up so I can just add a very subtle drop shadow. And with that same color, I'm just going in and defining some of those edges a little more, deepening the color in certain areas of the bird. It's a part I just look around and make sure I'm not missing anything, like the shadow I had planned on the bottom of that bird, which I do like adding, especially to just a simple character or spot illustration. It grounds it on the page. So selecting this brush, I'm just going in and lightly, just lightly adding very loose strokes here. And I always mix colors in my shadows. I find it's more interesting that way. So I sampled a little bit of the green in the wing, and I'm adding that. It's a personal preference of mine. I think it makes it more interesting, and it just links it so beautifully to the artwork if it's not just a flat shadow. And bump down the opacity a bit, makes it subtle. And another trick I like to do is sample my background, and I go in and soften the edges using the background color. So if it were white, I know this is like an ivory page we're using here with the speckled paper, but if it were white, I would do the same thing. And since we're nearing the end, I go in and I don't delete the rough sketch. I go in and just erase in areas. I think it's kind of fun when you look at it. It looks more handmade if you can see some of those sketchy lines showing through, but I find in some areas it can be distracting. So artist choice. You know, I don't like it here in the shadow, so I'm definitely erasing that. That's what I mean. I find that distracting, but those sweet loose lines around the body of the bird, I leave some of those in. All right, guys, this might scare some people, but as I come to the finish line, and especially for a simple illustration, I will pinch my layers if I'm happy with how it looks, and then just work on fine-tuning on that one layer. If this were a more complex illustration, I would not do that. I would duplicate the entire file and work. So I'd keep one duplicate that's completely layered, and then I would take another that's been flattened. that way if I needed to go back and make changes, I would have that copy of it. Here I'm just going through and I was adding a little bit of fluff to him. I love when birds are sitting on a branch and they're all cute and puffy. Make a new layer, and then we're going to go looking for this great brush down at the bottom called the Folk Noise brush. And it adds like this lovely speckle effect. Isn't that really cool? Oh, so pretty. I tend to sample a color, like I just grabbed the raspberry there, but I also did that creamy ivory of the page, and I go around and I lightly dust with the Folk Noise brush, and then I lower the opacity so it's subtle, but I feel it ties in so beautifully if you're using the speckled canvas. Great way to pull everything together. This would make a great little card. I think he's just so charming, and but he's a little big. I need to shrink him down a bit and move him over to give us space to add just a little birdie speech bubble, and you can see how easy this will be and how quick. Sometimes it's nice to have, even if you're working on a quick little spot illustration like this, to think, how could I use this? Would this work on a mug or a sticker or a greeting card? And just by adding a simple speech bubble here, you can make the cutest little note card that you could produce and send to a friend or sell in an online shop. Drag and drop. And next I'll just add the little tail to the speech bubble, again with the freehand tool. Skew that a bit, looks more interesting. I think the raspberry color would be pretty. And switch out the brush. Yeah, the vintage model line I think has a nice, it's smooth, it's easy to write with. A little bit thicker. And just put a simple hello. And how adorable is that? Wouldn't you love to get that in the mail? And there you have it. A stylized bird. We did it in less than 30 minutes using the fabulous vintage texture Procreate kit, full of canvases, palettes, and brushes. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had fun and learned something new. Happy creating!